Here's a term you've probably heard in the news: tax increment financing, or TIF. What is TIF? Why is it so controversial? How does that work? I'm Matt Mellott with Sterling Commercial Real Estate Advisors. In part one of the series on TIF funding, we're going to go over the basics. We'll call it TIF 101. Now, before we get started, it's important to note that here at Sterling CRE, we work on commercial sales and developments that involve TIF funds. From our experience, we know TIF projects aren't all good and they aren't all bad. We also know that the term TIF is pretty murky. This series is meant to help clear up some of the confusion about TIF, first by simplifying some of the concepts and then by looking at some local case studies. First, TIF funds can only be spent in something called a TIF district. The boundary of TIF districts, like the ones in Missoula, as you can see here, are established by local ordinances. In general, a city council or county commission creates the ordinance after gathering public input. The technical term for what the local government body creates is an urban renewal district, URD, or targeted economic development district, TED. Inside of a URD or TED is where TIF money can be applied. TIF districts, URDs, or TEDs are often used interchangeably but refer to the same concept typically. Cities create the districts to help fund improvements to an area that is considered to be blighted, which means it is in serious disrepair or lacks infrastructure. When and where a TIF can be applied depends on state and local laws. Montana law says that TIF funds can only be used to pay for specific things. Things like road widening and extensions, installation of sidewalks, street lighting, curbs and gutters, extending water, sewer, and broadband to areas of town that lack access are also common uses for TIF funds. So where does the money for TIF come from? This is where it starts to get interesting and also where the controversy comes from. All landowners in a TIF district pay taxes based on the value of their property. Just like a residential home has taxes that are assessed depending on what the property is worth. In a TIF district, the base value of properties are frozen for a period of time, often between 20 and 30 years. During this time, the tax revenue from this base value will be distributed to all the usual sources you see on your tax bill, things like schools, parks, and public safety. TIF funds are generated from the difference between the value of an improved property and the frozen base value. If big improvements are made on a building in a TIF district, then that building will have a higher value and therefore pays more taxes. That's the increment part of tax increment financing, the incremental amount between the actual value of a property and that frozen in time amount with the TIF district was put into place. So that was a lot of info, so I'll try to sum up here. On one hand, TIF funds can be allocated to a developer to improve a neighborhood that might be in desperate need of investment. These incentives encourage redevelopment and improvements in areas where a project otherwise might not pencil out. But on the other hand, those same TIF funds aren't helping to support the day-to-day services in that same district. Schools, public safety, and other levies in the districts don't get any of that additional tax revenue because it's all going back into the TIF bucket. So say a developer decides to build a new facility in a TIF district. How would they get TIF funds to help them expand the surrounding infrastructure? Whoever's making the improvements in a TIF district applies for the funds. That application is then considered by the agency that stewards the TIF funds. The redevelopment agency can choose to fund the full request, deny it, or just fund parts of the amount that was applied for. In the next part of our series, we'll cover some more details on the mechanics behind TIF. Then later in the series, we'll cover case studies on projects that had little public opposition and others that were highly controversial. Thanks for watching How Does That Work? You can get more content like this by clicking the link below to sign up for updates or by following Sterling CRE on Facebook and LinkedIn. Thanks for watching.